Let me just move on now to kind of the text of what I want to say tonight. I thought I could go two ways. I could basically repeat what was in the book, but then I thought, well, most of you probably read the book anyway, so I won't do that. I'll try to say something else. And tonight I want to say something just about the church in general and then tie it into some gay issues. All right. First of all, I think basically the church is approximately 30 years behind society. In society, gay people have reached a point where we can be proud of who we are. All right? Now, the very word, we got to these ideas of pride marches and gay pride and that kind of thing. And that was a direct repudiation of shame, because we were supposed to be ashamed of who we are. So gay pride got us out there saying we're here, we're queer, and we're not going away. Now, that spirit located gay people as being fully present, as being absolutely out and about, and not secreted and cloistered away, hidden in the shadows where people cannot see us, but very, very present at all levels of a society, out and unashamed, in a way I like to put it these days as kind of part of the furniture of Australian society. And when that happens, of course, society has to adjust. And it did adjust. It had to get used to us. It had to get its collective head around us being present. Or if you like, it had to come around to us being around. As a consequence, as we heard before from Greg, laws changed. Our lives, for the very first time, came to be validated publicly, and the idea slowly evolved as being completely normal that society has both straight and gay people. All right. Now, when normalisation occurs, a phenomenon no longer is remarkable. It's not such a big deal anymore to see a gay person on television, to see gay characters in movies, in dramas and sitcoms or any other genre. All right. To know that really famous people are gay and have same-sex partners. For example, it's not such a big deal to see Anthony Kalia come out at Carols by Candlelight in the Sydney Myer Music Bowl and sing his little heart out, all right? Or to see Matthew Mitcham diving for Australia at Olympic level, all right? Or to see Penny Wong on 7:30 talking about the financial affairs of the country. All right? Nobody bats an eyelid anymore. On the whole, we're just an accepted part of society. Now, of course, with any kind of normalisation like that, you'll always get kickback, and there has been and continues to be from time to time. Those who want to conserve the status quo, who refuse to countenance any movement away from what they find familiar. But change, I think, is inevitable once that normalisation process begins. And conservatives eventually are just ignored as the change gradually creeps forward. Now let's talk about the church. I think the same thing is going to happen to the church. I think it too will take time. And it will change. It will change, and I think it probably already has changed if you talk to the ordinary person in the Sunday pew. There are gay people in every church in the land. Some are out and brave the disdain of the few, and others are not out and kind of just pass as straight people as they come along each week and participate in the life of the church. Most parishioners, I would suggest, though, have a general idea of who might be gay most of the time, and most of the time are perfectly fine with it. And with gay marriage just around the corner, I would suggest, in Australia, and pastors and ministers already standing up and saying, I'm actually happy to officiate at your wedding, I think it's now the turn of the church to get the message, we're queer, we're here, and we're not going away. Right? Just the same as society 30-odd, 40 years ago. We've been a part of the church from the very beginning, and we're still here. Many of us have actually led the church from up here out the front. right? In liturgy, in music, in worship, in prayer, in presiding at the Eucharist, in counselling, in pastoral work, like visiting the sick and the shut-ins and the unemployed and the shunned. You know, gay people have blessed the church with incredible giftings, and I would argue actually have a particular knack at doing pastoral work. And I think this is because gay people have a fount of knowledge and wisdom born out of what their own experience of what it feels like to be the marginalised, the shunned, the rejected, the forgotten about, or if you want to put it normally, the minority. So after a time, that normalisation process takes place, and it becomes unremarkable for people that gay people come to church. And that's because people are already used to knowing gay people at work and at school and at university and at the sporting fixture. So it's not a big deal to see them here on a Sunday. We are all part of the community that we live in and contribute to. So for that shift, that normalisation process to continue healthily, I think the church needs to make a major adjustment to its official stance on gay sexuality. I don't think it's enough that the ordinary person in the pew is accepting, but that the authorities and the potentates are not. So, how can the church change? In my consulting rooms, whenever I'm doing behavioural change with anybody, I use a 4-step process. And I think it kind of works for groups and for society and even for the church. First of all, there's the awareness of the need to change. Counselling 101 says you cannot change what you don't acknowledge. All right? You can't change what you're not aware of. And the church needs to be aware that gay people are around and are here. All right? The second is the ability to change. All right? And I think the church does have the ability to change. The church has many, many, many people who are highly educated, who are open-hearted, who are loving people, who want to share the good news and spread the love of God and the love of Christ, not only in their own hearts, but to help out with other people. I think the church does have the ability to change. The third is the willingness to change. You know, there are lots and lots of smokers out there tonight who would like to stop smoking, but who are at this moment in time not willing to. And it's the same kind of attitude. We have to go from an ability to change to a willingness to actually move position. And again, I think the church can do that because I've begun to see it happening already. The gay conversation has begun. It began before my book. My book has helped it along, and it will continue along. And people like Rod and others of his ilk are helping the conversation to continue. And finally, the fourth stage is the undertaking the change, actually doing it, effecting it, executing the change. And so here we have, for example, a lovely example here in Adamstown, where we've got an out gay man pastoring, being invited very openly to minister in this city and to lead a local parish and to minister the gospel. And that's a remarkable change. That's a remarkable change. Part of the change, I think also, you certainly know this if you've read the book, is the attitude to science again, and to the acquisition of knowledge. You know, I wrote a whole chapter on epistemology in Being Gay, Being Christian. What we think of knowledge, where do we get it, what do we do with knowledge, how does it change, how does it evolve? And so that twin thing of epistemology and how we get knowledge and the attitude to science are two of the big things that I think the Christian church needs to change. So I want to address two areas that I think are important in that regard. The first is to the evangelicals and the second is to the Catholics. All right? So let me start with the evangelicals. It's fairly short, so we'll get through this. I think evangelical fundamentalism has a disorder. There's the psychologist coming out in me. And I think the disorder is an addiction to certainty. An addiction to certainty. It's found in its attitude to the Bible and to belief in general. There is just one way to believe. There is one straight orthodoxy. You need to believe these 5 statements or these 5 declarations in order to be a real Christian. All right? Now, the problem with that is that everybody has 5 different things. Yeah? How many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Christian groups have been formed since the beginning, all believing that they've got it right? The addiction to certainty holds no place, or no headspace, if you like, for the journey, for discovery, for the search, for doubt, which is the other side of the coin of faith. All fundamentals, I believe, including doubt, for a real, gutsy spirituality. The addiction to certainty, I think, is one of the biggest turn-offs to ordinary people to the Christian church and to the message of the gospel. And if you don't believe me, just go out and ask them. All right? One survey asked people what they thought of when they heard the category Christian. And the most frequent answers were, wait for it, and it's pretty horrible, judgmental, stupid, nasty. And they didn't like the way they treated gay people. How did we get to that? How on earth did we get to that? It's just mind-boggling. There's this big movement of a return to first century Christianity, the Via Apostolica, the apostolic way. I think it's completely misinformed. You know, we've got to get back to what it was like at the beginning. I think it's misinformed for a number of reasons. Number one, we have different cultures to first century Middle East. We have a different time and what goes on in those times. We have different societal arrangements from antiquity. For example, we don't live in gated cities. We don't live in villages in the West or city-states. The welfare state in the West does exist. We have laws that prevent discrimination. We have different mores and values to the first century. For example, egalitarianism. We don't have slaves anymore. All right? And we hold women to be the equal of men in every way. People who actually knew Jesus are not around anymore to tell us what he said, or how he said it, or who he said it to, and in what context he said it. No, I don't think we need a first century Christianity. I think we need a really good 21st century Christianity, a reasonable faith, a faith that makes sense in a post-Enlightenment world of modernity, where the centre of faith remains true, but the format may change, where modern understandings of life, the earth, the cosmos, humanity, including human sexuality, are considered no threat to God whatsoever. And I end this section with a quote from John Shelby Spong. This is my favourite quote of Spong. I'm angry at him because I wished I'd written it. He says that the new way reveals the willingness to explore the truth of God without seeking to protect God from the disturbance of new insights. And it also reveals that any God who is threatened by any truth from any source is clearly dead already. Yeah, it's very powerful. All right, let me finish off with the Catholics. Strap in, Bishop Bill. Catholic Christianity, for me, has one foot stuck in the past and one foot in the present. Many of the church's dogmas and teachings were formed, I think, with every good intention, but mostly hundreds and hundreds of years ago, over various bygone ages where knowledge was treated very, very differently. In pre-Enlightenment Europe, knowledge was received wisdom. It was constant. It was reliable. It was unchanging. It was also passed down in an inequitable dynamic. All the power on the part of the church and no power on the part of the ordinary person. It was to be accepted and not questioned, much less challenged. There were even sanctions against people who did question it or, God forbid, challenge it. Look at Galileo. And in the 20th century, people like Hans Küng. These declarations were promulgated as truth, with divine certitude. Now, in today's world, we treat knowledge very, very differently. So I ask myself what's to be done. I think the Catholic Church needs to come up with a mechanism that revisits older teachings in the light of modernity. Now, I don't know what that mechanism is, but I hope they can look at that challenge and try to meet it in some way. The area of gay sexuality is one such issue. The Church, for example, could accept that science has clearly shown, beyond dispute, that being gay is a lifelong orientation, stable across the lifespan, neither willfully chosen nor willfully changed. The Church could resile from describing gay people as intrinsically disordered, and that our sexual orientation as being an inclination to moral evil. The Church could understand that the expression of one's identity is part of the ontology or the beingness of that identity. And what I mean by that is a gay sexuality is an essential part of the self. It's not a tack-on. It's not an extra add-on. It's an essential, elemental part of the self, both physically and psychologically, and that to deny expression of the essential self brings only enormous distress and ultimately even mental illness to one degree or another. So the Christian Church, both Catholic and Protestant, could stop telling us that we must not love, we must not feel desire, we must not want to share our lives with another human being, and that we must commit to an automatic, non-negotiable obligation to lifelong celibacy. That would be a start. Yeah? I think the 21st century Church can do better than this. I think there is a feeling right across the church that they are losing their place within the community, and with that the opportunity of talking about the Jesus message. The Jesus message, in a nutshell, that our God is a relational God whose essential nature is love, and that in our dealings with our fellow human beings we should try to act out of a place of love, forgiveness and compassion. I think the gay sexuality issue is an indicator, I think, of how the church will fare in this world, which is rapidly changing before our eyes. People want and expect more from church today than just a rehash of ideas that don't gel with the reality of their lived experience. It certainly didn't with mine. I finish with two quotes from St. Francis. The first is this. He said, "If you have men who will exclude any of God's creatures from the shelter of compassion and pity, you will have men who will deal likewise with their fellow men." And the second St. Francis quote is this: "While you are proclaiming peace with your lips, be careful to have it even more fully in your heart." All right. The church can do better than proclaim peace and treat gay people so shabbily. So many people today continue to proclaim and to that they have a spirituality of some sort. You hear it all the time. I still think the Christian gospel, or the Jesus message as I've been calling it tonight, has something to say. Ultimately, spirituality and Christianity in our focus tonight is not about whose 5 statements of orthodoxy are true and right. It's about getting to the heart of what Jesus told us in his teachings and what he showed us by his life as an example. And to end, frankly, I'm happy to leave the rest to God. Thanks, Rob.